Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be doing another goals check-in and telling you how my reading goals are going. So this is like my third quarterly goals update. So I'm going to be talking about how my reading goals have been going in July, August and September. I'm filming this during October, but I think because of all the Victober videos, it probably won't end up going up until November. So it's going to be like a month late, but you know, we'll live with that. So all my statistics and stuff are going to be from the end of September, but you know, that's fine. So I do one of these goals check-in videos like every 3 months and I really enjoy doing them. And what I do is go through like my reading goals from the beginning of the year and tell you how I'm getting on with them. And then I also go through my like little monthly reading checklist thing that I have, which we'll get to later in the video. So to start off with the basic Goodreads challenge, for 2020 I set my Goodreads reading challenge at 100 books, but I also set myself a personal challenge of reading 150 books. And the reason why I have two different numbers there is because I read a lot of books for my job. I'm an assistant editor at a publishing house, so I have to read a lot for work, and most of the things I read for work are like a year or more out from being published, so I can't mark them as read on Goodreads. So I like keep a list separately for myself. At the end of September I'd read 160 books in total. Goodreads thought I had read 119. 45 of the books I've read in 2020 so far have been for work, and then the other 115 have not been for work. So I have already got past my Goodreads goal, and I'm hoping that in total, including the books I read for work, I can get to 200 books this year. Last year I was on like 196 and I just slightly wanted to be at 200 because I thought it would be fun. So this year I'm going to read 200 books. That's the plan. I think I can do that. Let's see how we go. Then my like big reading goal for 2020 was to get my physical TBR down. So I have a little TBR jar which has folded up on slips of paper the names of all the books that are on my physical TBR that I haven't read yet, that I have owned since before Christmas 2019. So at the beginning of the year this had 55 titles in, and then my overall physical TBR was at 61 books because I'd got like 6 books for Christmas. And I said at the beginning of the year that I wanted to get down to 20 titles in this jar and my physical TBR overall to 40. So if you remember my previous goals videos, my jar has actually downsized now. It's a much smaller jar, and I actually only now have 14 books in this jar. So I'm really pleased with that. I've already hit my target, and I now want to get down to 5 books in this by the end of the year. Basically, I think I could read every book that's listed in this jar by the end of the year, but there are a few books in here that I'm planning on buddy reading with people and things like that, so I'm not too fussed if I don't get to every single one by the end of the year, but I would really like to get this jar down to just 5 titles. And then my overall physical TBR, like I said, it was at 61 books I think at the beginning of 2020. Then at the end of June I got it down to 49 books. In July, August, September I read 14 books from my physical TBR, but then I also bought 6 books. So at the end of September my physical TBR is at 41 books, so I'm very close to the target. And I think by the end of October, from what I'm reading this month so far, I think it will be down to 35 books. So actually I will have hit my target already, and I now think I could hopefully get my overall physical TBR down to like 20 books by the end of the year. I'd really like that. That would be really satisfying. I don't feel the need for a 0 TBR, but I would like to feel more freedom to acquire more books without thinking that I won't get to them for ages, if you see what I mean. Another goal I'd had for 2020 was to get to the books that have been on my physical TBR for the longest, which were number 11, The Count of Monte Cristo, and The Mountains Echoed, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Wolf Brother and The Vore. I have now read all of them, so I have ticked that goal off, which I feel very pleased about. The Count of Monte Cristo and The Mountains Echoed were 2 of my favourite books of this year so far. The Vore was terrible, so you know, you win some, you lose some. And now to move on to my monthly reading prompts. If you are newer to this channel and you haven't seen this before, basically what I have done both last year and this year is set out what for me like an ideal reading month would look like and make that into a checklist, and then I check things off. And it's not too strict. I don't mind if I don't tick every single box every month, but in general I found it like quite a fun way to make sure there's variety in my reading, and it's something that I find quite satisfying. Basically basically, I really like gamifying my reading, and this is something I found really fun. So July, August and September have been slightly odd months, as you can see. I've got lots of things which are ticked off and like times by however numbers, and there are a few gaps as well, but that's fine. I was doing Jane Austen in July, which obviously affected what I was reading, and in August I had like a specific month focusing on non-Victorian classics, so I've had a few like other reading plans going on for the last few months that have meant I haven't necessarily been ticking off everything. So my first monthly prompt is to read a Victorian classic, and in July I read The Philanderer by George Bernard Shaw, which is a play by him which I really enjoyed. I didn't read any Victorian literature in August or September, which is mostly because it was in the run-up to Victober, and if there were any like Victorian books I wanted to read, I was just like, oh, I'll save them for Victober, which actually kind of makes me a little bit sad because I feel like I would like Victorian literature spread throughout my year, but there we go. The last 3 months have been very heavy on the non-Victorian classics. In July I read 6, in August I read 15, and in September I read 5. So I'm gonna tell you all the non-Victorian classics I read. We're gonna go quite quickly because there are many. In July I read lots of Jane Austen. I reread some of her juvenilia. I reread Pride and Prejudice, Emma and Mansfield Park. Then I also read The Castles of Athlin and Dunblane by Anne Radcliffe, and I also read some poetry by William Cooper. Then in August I read The Pearl by John Steinbeck, Death in Venice by Thomas Mann, The Awakening by Kate Chopin, Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, The Alienist by Machado de Assis, The Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie, The Death of Ivan Illich by Leo Tolstoy, Franny and Zooey by J.D. Salinger, Passing by Nella Larson, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist by Robert Tressel, Dublin 4 by Maeve Binchy, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, Beloved by Toni Morrison, Peril at End House by Agatha Christie, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. That was a lot of books. A lot of them were very short classics. I think my favourites were Passing by Nella Larson and The Awakening by Kate Chopin, which were both just amazing. And then in September I read Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, The Longest Journey by Ian Forster, The Colour Purple by Alice Walker, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, The Journey to the Centre of the Earth by Jules Verne, and June by Frank Herbert. My favourite of those was by a long way The Colour Purple, which is one of my favourite books of the year so far. I can't decide if it is the favourite book of the year so far or not, but it would definitely be in the top 3. It was very good. I also try and read a work of historical fiction every month. In July I read What Kitty Did Next by Carrie Cableen, which is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, so obviously set in the Regency period, and then I also read To Have and to Hoax, which is a rom-com set in the Regency period. I really loved What Kitty Did Next, did not love To Have and to Hoax quite so much. In August, 2 of the non-Victorian classics I read also happened to be historical fiction. Beloved by Toni Morrison is written in like the 80s, it's a modern classic, but it's set in the 19th century, and then The Hunchback of Notre Dame was written in the 19th century but is set in the 15th century. And then in September I read one work of historical fiction, which was Havisham by Ronald Frame, which is a retelling of Great Expectations, so obviously is set in the Victorian period. And then I also try and read a work of commercial women's fiction every month. In July I read To Have and to Hoax, which I just mentioned. It's historical fiction, it's set in the Regency period, but it's also a rom-com, so it definitely counts as commercial women's fiction. I also read It Started With a Secret, which is a rom-com by Jill Mansell, and I also read Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty. I loved Big Little Lies, it was so good, and Leanne Moriarty is a really interesting author who's on that like cusp between commercial women's fiction and thriller, which is a like area that I really enjoy. In August I read The Switch by Beth O'Leary, which is another rom-com, and then I also am counting Dublin 4 by Maeve Binchy in this. I know I also counted Dublin 4 as a non-Victorian classic. I find Maeve Binchy a really interesting writer because she was writing in sort of the 80s and 90s, and I sort of consider her books modern classics, but they're also sort of really important like founding books in the genre of commercial women's fiction, so she sort of deserves to be along in both categories. And then in September I read The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, and also The Love Square by Laura Jane Williams, both rom-coms, and the first an American rom-com, second is a British one. I've also been picking books out of my TBR jar every month. In July I read Courtiers by Lucy Worsley, which was a book from my TBR jar. In August I read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and then in September I picked lots of books out of my TBR jar, and because I was trying to make a dent in my physical TBR, I read Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, which I really enjoyed, Havisham by Donald Frame, and June by Frank Herbert. I've also done quite a lot of buddy reads in the last few months. In July, both Emma and Mansfield Park I buddy read with Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and also we were hosting read-alongs of them, so we read them with lots of other people as well. And then also the Cooper poetry that I read was another buddy read with Marissa. In August, me and Marissa buddy read The Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and I also buddy read The Hunchback of Notre Dame with Madeline from Made with Books. And then in September, I buddy read The Longest Journey with Carolyn from Carolyn's Reading Rambles, and I also buddy read Jamaica Inn and The Colour Purple with, of course, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. We do many buddy reads together. It is great fun. I also have down on my monthly checklist to read a review copy, which I did every month without fail for the first 6 months of the year. And then I basically ran out of review copies, and I haven't really been requesting any because, as I've mentioned in various videos before, I'm having a complicated living situation at the moment, so I'm not at the moment very keen to acquire any more books because I'm going to have to move them all at some point, and most of my books are in storage. It's not a good time for getting review copies, is basically what I'm saying. So I haven't really been getting any review copies, so I haven't really been reading any, so this is all blank. That's fine. Finally, I have a free choice prompt for anything that doesn't fit into the above categories. So in July, I read The Banker's Sister by E.J. Clary, which is a non-fiction book about Jane Austen, and I also reread the first Artemis Fowl book, which is a middle grade novel. In August, I read Fire Song, which is another middle grade novel, and in September, I read The Glass Hotel by Emily Sindon Mandel, which was amazing and didn't fit into any other categories. So there we go. Those are how my goals have been going up until the end of September. Do let me know down in the comments how your 2020 reading goals are going, and that is it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.